Hello everyone, Delta One here. I figured I'd do a little quickie before I pull out. I'm waiting for the truck to warm up. And I actually parked in the parking lot today instead of in the yard. Well, wanted to go over DTC or diagnostic trouble code clearing. Because I got a couple messages about my video yesterday when I had my Altel and I was clearing codes. And I can't remember. I was trying to lock the doors. But I do recall in that description actually stating that that the codes that you were seeing that showed all those faults were stored codes. They weren't active codes. The only active code, like I said, was the occupant restraint module and the tire pressure monitor. And I actually calibrated the windows while I was doing that, so even the door modules don't have codes in them no more. But I wanted to touch on this because a couple of people that were messaging did not know the difference, didn't know what they were actually talking about. Some of them did, but again, their complaints weren't valid because I stated in that video that the truck had its battery unplugged and that I was working with the module, that occupant restraint module that throws the entire system into chaos. So there's no check engine light on the vehicle. It's only the occupant restraint module, which does not throw a check engine light. It's a U code that's in the background. Well, if we're talking about a typical dealer type scan tool, not a scan tool you'll go to like AutoZone and go buy or get them to scan your code, or a cheapo scanner to go do. We're talking about like a high level launch tool. Because I say high level launch tool because you do have launch scan tools. I have one. I don't think I reviewed it, but I think I've used it in a couple of my videos. It's a launch CRP 123 or something like that. That's a low level scan tool. That scan tool is like roughly 150 to 200 something, 300 something bucks. I mean like the launch touchpad like scan tool, the bigger one, the big brother. Or an Altel 905 if you have one before it got discontinued. The 906 BT, the 906 itself, the 906 TS, the 908, scan tools like that, or the dealer, which I think Chevy's Tech 2 or something like that, and Chrysler's Y-Tech, those types of scan tools. Those scan tools that can clear every module on your vehicle, you have three types of codes. You have an active code that I guess if you count that, 4. You have an active code that you can't clear because until that's fixed, it won't clear. Basically, my occupant restraint module, since it is not on the system, it will always come up. I can't clear that code. You have a stored code that you can clear, and you have a stored code. You have a stored code that you can't clear, and then you have a freeze code. Depending on your scan tool, you may have the fourth one, you may not. It's a freeze code or a freeze data that no matter what, it stays in there, primarily for emissions when you go do your but you do your inspection and they want to hook up to see, so you can't just go and clear your crap and then it still be in there and then, go try to get it inspected and all that crap. It stays in there. And that freeze code is usually a code such as your, I want to say like your drive monitors. It's like that. Now your active code, that's obvious. Every computer can read that. In most cases, if you don't have a high level scan tool, you can't clear codes out of everything. But if you can and you still don't have the right tool, you can clear a stored code and it'll just come back. Primarily being is because you probably didn't solve whatever that problem was and it'll come right back. But in most cases, I'm trying to watch this person back up because they're not clearly backing up properly. Really? They're clearly not making that. But those are stored codes that usually if you clear them, they will be cleared if you fix the problem. Of course there's more into that, but I'm just touching base on it. You have a stored code that you can't clear. And why are you turning so sharply? Then you have stored codes that you can't clear. Those types of codes are ones that are typically loss of comm stored codes you can clear if you fix the loss of comm issue. Codes like some evap codes, it'll be a stored code, but you can't clear it because it won't clear it because it has to go through a drive cycle. And then you have your other stored codes which would technically be the number 3, but some scan tools don't mark it down as that, and you'll actually have that 4-step where it'll be a stored code that you can clear, but it'll still be on there as it won't show up as a DTC on your scan tool. It'll just be there. It won't show up as a DTC. It'll just be a stored code that the computer does not see or your scan tool does not see as an error. And the other one is a DTC that you can clear, that you can't clear, that no matter how many, like the one with the loss of comms with my door modules because they were out of calibration. Those modules, even though there's nothing wrong with them, they were out of calibration. Focus. I couldn't clear them, but once I did the miscalibration, after they lose calibration, after I redo the calibration, I could clear the stored code, but when I went back, the code was still there because it hasn't run through the computer learning yet. Because I did it with the truck off, so it hadn't actually learned everything yet. And then you have another monitor, I can't remember which one it was, where I cleared it, or at least I thought I did. It said it cleared it, but it didn't actually clear it because it says it's stored, which means it won't throw a check engine light. That's really what stored means. It won't throw a check engine light. But if you go check your scan tool, in most cases, if it's what I'm talking about, it'll still show that there's a DTC in it, but it still shows in red that you have one fault in there. Even though that fault has been cleared, it's still stored until it runs that drive cycle. In some cases, O2 sensors will do that because of the emissions or whatever, if you can't do a drive cycle. There's a lot more into that, but essentially, those are like, if you do have just your basic all-around scan tool that can clear everything, you usually just have the 3, where you have a stored scan, an active, a stored that you can clear, and a stored that you can't clear. And what I meant by that 4th one was that it's a stored that you can't clear, but you still have that fault code in it. And then the other one is a stored that you can't clear that won't show the fault code in it. So just wanted to touch base on that, on DTC clearing. Of course, you don't want to clear codes just randomly, just because it's got fault codes, just to clear it. That won't help you. That won't fix a problem. That won't actually help you diagnose anything at all. I'm pretty sure there's a well amount of documentation, especially on YouTube, about not just clearing codes. But in that particular instance, keep in mind, I've done everything to this truck, and I've pulled the battery I don't know how many times to work on different modules. I know what codes are set. If I go home now and go start the truck, I will have no check engine light. I'll basically have what I have now on this, is where I have a tire pressure sensor light, I'll have the seatbelt light, except I'll have one additional light, and two additional lights. One light will be the airbag light, and the other light will be traction control, which is, I don't think I can do it. No, I can't. No. All the thing this does is VDC on and off. It doesn't actually show me a traction control. But that's what I wanted to touch on, because a lot of people got really confused on well, I won't say a lot of people, let's say a few people got really confused on what I was talking about with what I was doing, and what I was doing was wrong. But you got to keep in mind, this is a truck that was completely underwater. It runs and drives great, no DTCs. The electrics check out on it. The only thing that's left to do now is to do the internal electrical for the blower motor, not blower motor, but for the blend door and the occupant restraint module, the seat belt, and then anything else that's left on the truck is just servicing, like changing the oil out to the proper oil, changing the filter, draining the water out of the coolant and putting in actual Mopar coolant, dropping the transmission pan, replacing the transmission fluid. That's literally the only thing I have left on that truck, and then it's ready to rock and roll. I may this week go ahead and change the water to coolant and change the oil, and then that way while I'm done I can just close the hood and I'll be done under the hood. Well, I say that, but I'll have to pull the battery again to change the occupant restraint module, well, put the occupant restraint module in, and to do the seatbelt or the retractor. And I may or may not have to do it to do the blend door. I actually got to pull the center console out to check to see if the blend door is actually the reason or if it's the motor. Hopefully it's the motor, because if it's not the motor, that means I got to pull the dash again, and I got to pull the box and fix that one door. So we will see. Peace, guys.